Hey guys, it's Sam, and this is my November wrap-up. I managed to get through 6 books this month, and that was pretty good considering that this was tome Topple, so half of the month was devoted to larger books, which typically take me longer to read, obviously. So let's get going. The first book that I read this month was The Young Elites by Marie Lu. I have actually read this book. I read it back when it first came out in 2014, so I'll link my review up above, but this book I did not like very much when it first came out, but I have since wanted to pick the series back up and see if my opinions will change about it, because this is a villain origin story. The first time that I read it, like I said, I didn't enjoy it. I don't know if it was just I didn't have my expectations correct for it, but for some reason I just didn't like it. This time rereading it, I actually kind of enjoyed it. It still wasn't a favorite. The writing doesn't blow me away by any means, but I think I do want to give the rest of the series a chance. I do like Adelina more this read through. There were still some things that bothered me. There is kind of like an insta-love situation here that I don't really like, but this time around I kind of saw where that came from. I just kind of noticed more things this time around. I still think the world building is pretty lackluster because it's a fantasy world that I don't really understand and things just aren't kind of explained in it. But I did like a lot of the character interactions, and I did like seeing kind of Adelina's backstory and kind of her psyche and how she's going to be this villain, and I want to see her get more villainous. So I do plan on continuing with the series. The first time I read it, I think I gave this book 2 stars, and this time I would say it's between 3 and 3.5 stars. Again, it might just be because my expectations were a ton lower, but I'm going to give the rest of the series a chance, and I plan on reading the rest of it, so we'll see how I feel with future books. I then picked up Addicted for Now by Krista and Becca Ritchie. This is the 3rd book in their very large new adult romance series, and it follows a number of different couples, but this little trilogy, which is the first 3 books, the Addicted kind of trilogy of them, it covers Lily and Lo, who are both addicts. Lily is a sex addict and Lo is an alcoholic, and they have this really, in the first book, they have this really codependent, toxic relationship, and they actually aren't dating, but they are fake dating, if you like that kind of trope, to kind of fool everybody because they have these really awful addictions, and then everything kind of takes off from there. So this is a 3rd book, and there are other books in their perspective later on in the series, because this series is kind of a companion series, so they kind of all get twisted up in each other at some point, but this is the last of like their core trilogy. And I did not like this book. I am just trying to read these books because I want to get to the other couples in the series, because these are all the girls in the series are sisters, and they each obviously are paired off with somebody, and I like the other pairings, especially one in particular, and I want to get to that one. I think that one's next in the series, but this series, I like the interactions with the characters, and I like the interactions especially with these other characters that you get to see glimpses of this book, but I do not like these 2 main characters, and their addictions are written, I think, rather poorly. The authors just beat you over the head with them. Like, every chapter in Lily's perspective for all of these 3 books, and these are about 500 or more pages of books, they are just talking about sex and talking about how she wants to touch herself and talking about how she wants to have sex with people. It's all sex all the time, and I don't really care to read about that. Like, it's not even necessarily that she's having sex, it's that she's always thinking about it, and I get that as part of addiction, but these books really, with these 2 characters, just dissolve the characters into their addictions. Like, I don't really know much about them besides that. They're supposedly like comic book fans, it's occasionally mentioned, but that's about it. So all we have is their codependent relationship, which is improving, but is still very, very codependent, even in this book, and their addictions. And that's all that they are. Like, we don't really have any other character traits, personality. Like, I don't know anything about them besides Lo loves booze and Lily loves Lo and sex. And that's it. So I am done with them. And this was pretty excruciating to read, honestly. So I gave this one 1.5 stars. That 0.5 is just for those other side characters that we're going to get more of in later books, because I think those characters are well written. I know more about them than I know about Lily and Lo, who are the main characters. I'm really frustrated with this series. A lot of my friends will like this series, and I plan on continuing with the series, obviously, but I am done with Lily and Lo. I cannot with them anymore. I am so ready to not be in their POVs anymore. I'm done. 1.5 stars. I then picked up The Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller. This is an adult Iliad retelling, and this just follows Achilles and Patroclus and their friendship and love, because they are obviously in love, even in history this is proven. So this just follows their relationship, and it is the mythical portion as well. I wasn't sure going into this if it would be actual, like, historical kind of fact and just leave out the myth stuff, but there is definitely, like, myth, magic, mythological characters, all the people that you are familiar with from the Iliad, but it's just in this retelling. And the writing is beautiful, the world and mythology is obviously beautiful, the characters are all very morally gray, honestly. Like, there's not anybody who's like perfect and wonderful, and it is a tragedy because obviously the Iliad is like a tragic book, a tragic poem, and it's so good. I really liked seeing like this kind of perspective, and I loved their relationship, and I loved their relationship with other people as well. And it was just really beautiful. And I knew, like, from history and from, like, knowing the Iliad, I'm pretty sure everyone knows the Iliad, you know how it's gonna end, and you're still like, what happens? It was really good. I really enjoyed this one. I've had a lot of friends recommend this to me, and I've heard beautiful things about it, and this one did not disappoint. I will have a review coming up for this, I think, on Monday. So if you want more thoughts, I'll be talking about it more there, but 5 out of 5 stars. Then was the beginning of Tome Topple, and for all of you that participated in Tome Topple, thank you all so much. This round was arguably even better than the first round. It went so well. We had a lot of amazing hosts, and really a lot of participation on the Twitter and everything, and with the Goodreads group, and we've had awesome feedback, and I can't wait for the next round. I always have a great time. I love it so much, and I'm so glad that you guys are all so excited about it, so thank you all so much. I'm not sure when the next round will be yet, since this round just ended, but I think it's probably going to be late spring, early summer at this point. I like to try to kind of plan it around times when people might have breaks or not have a ton of school. We can't do that for everybody, obviously. There's always going to be a time when like people can't participate. That's just the nature of it. I know some people couldn't participate this round because of like NaNoWriMo or finals or whatever, but we try to at least have multiple ones throughout the year so that you can participate in some of them. So I will kind of look at schedules and kind of see when I think things will be best for the next round, but spring, summer, sometime. So the first book that I picked up for Tome Topple is Warbreaker by Brandon Sanderson. This is a standalone adult fantasy, and it takes place in one of his worlds that is in his Cosmere universe. This is a multiple POV story, but it does follow in particular 2 sisters, and one of them, her entire life, has been promised to this god king. And in this world there are these people called the Returned, one of them, the one in charge, being the god king. And they are people who have died and then have come back to life, not in like a zombie way, but in like a borderline immortal because they won't age but they can die kind of way, and they are supposed to be the gods of this world. This world also has a really unique magic system. It is something called breath, and basically it's kind of like people's soul energy almost, but you can have more breath than just your one, and the more breath that you have, the more powerful you are, and you can breathe into objects and kind of animate them to do work for you in a way. And it also is really focused in on color as well, and there's color kind of attached to the breath, and the more breath you have, the more color becomes important, and you can see different tones, and you can like colors affected by you and stuff like that. It's kind of hard to explain, but when you read it, it makes sense. If you're familiar with Brandon Sanderson magic systems, it'll make sense to you. It's not my favorite of the magic systems of his, obviously Mistborn is so far, but I really did like this one. It's really very interesting. So anyway, that is kind of the synopsis. This girl is going to be married off, and actually, instead of the older sister that was supposed to go being sent, the younger sister gets sent last minute, and everything kind of takes off from there. It's probably a very convoluted synopsis, but that's kind of the way the story is. I went into this not knowing anything, and I was pretty pleased with that, actually. So if you don't know much about this book, that's kind of okay, but I ended up really liking this one. It's not my favorite of the Brandon Sandersons. Again, it's still Mistborn for me, but I've only read this and Mistborn from him, so there's a ton more that I still have to get to. But I did really enjoy this. Again, it's focused around female characters. I think that he wrote female characters better in this book than he did in Mistborn, because I wasn't a big fan of Vin, who's the main character in Mistborn. But I think that he wrote the women way better in this one. And this is a slower story, so there is still magic and action in it, but this is definitely more of like a political intrigue story, and it's definitely one of those very typical Brandon Sanderson where all these layers are getting piled up and you know something's coming, and then the ending happens and it's like BAM! So it's that's kind of the formula that he follows, which is one that I really love, honestly. And I really liked a lot of things. There were a lot of different twists and turns, as there always is in Brandon Sanderson books, and I ultimately really enjoyed this. I have heard that he might be writing a second one of this, but it's not going to be coming out for like years. Obviously, he has a lot on his plate. But I would love for a second book of this one, for sure. Like, there's things I still need. And it's good as a standalone, and I'd be fine with it, because it's an ending that's like, it wraps things up, but there's things that could happen after. And I want to see that. So I will be doing a full spoiler-free review and a gush on this coming up later this month on my channel, so if you're interested in that, definitely check it out. But I gave this one 4 out of 5 stars. The next book that I picked up for Tome Topple was The Mirror Empire by Cameron Hurley, and I buddy read this with Adriana at Perpetual Pages. We both have said that this is a really hard book to have a synopsis for, because we still, at the end of the book, don't quite know what is going on. But this takes place in a fantasy world. It's an adult fantasy story, and it is a matriarchal society. And at the beginning of the story, there is something going on where a girl gets sent through a portal via blood magic, and she gets sent through to a parallel universe. So this is all focused around parallel universes, and there are people in the different parallel universes trying to come through for different various reasons. There is a lot of political kind of intrigue in this. This is also focused around kind of elemental magic. The people in here get their powers through whichever satellite is in the sky at a certain time, whichever star is in the sky. So it kind of varies depending on the year and what is in the sky, and your powers are obviously at their peak when the star is in the sky, but when it goes under, then your powers are really weak, and there's a lot with that. There's also carnivorous sentient plant life in here, and there's a lot going on, actually, but I still don't know a lot about it, which is why I can't really provide a synopsis. This is also a multiple POV story, so there's a lot of things that Cameron Hurley had to juggle, and because of that, I did not end up really enjoying this story. There's a lot of really cool stuff with this. I love that it's a matriarchal society. Hell yeah. I also love that this book does a lot of cool things with gender and sexuality. There are also no straight characters in this story. Everybody is pansexual, I guess you could say, because there are multiple genders in each country. So one of the countries has 5 different genders and one of them has 3. So no matter what, people would have to be kind of more than bisexual at this point. They'd have to be multiple. They really don't make a big deal out of it, so that's really cool. And there are multiple different genders, like I said, which is also really cool. And so you do have pronouns that are different and stuff like that, and talking about how people are labeled. There's also a character who goes between genders and is kind of gender fluid, but literally they go through different genders and become different genders throughout their lifetime. So there's a lot going on with that. That I really liked, but everything else I found really confusing, and the story does not let you get immersed in it. It definitely keeps you at arm's length. So there's a lot of things that I don't know as a reader. There's a lot of things being kept from the characters for seemingly no reason, so you don't know as a reader. And it just doesn't make a ton of sense at all why we're being left out of so many things. Even though this is the first book in a series, I read over 500 pages of this book, and I still feel like I don't know much more than I knew at the beginning, which is really frustrating. And there is a lot going on as far as like political stuff, but it still doesn't quite make sense. There is a glossary in the back, which does help, because there's a lot of like different terms, and some of the terms are the same in different worlds, so you have to kind of see like, okay, in this world, what does this mean, really? And there's a lot with that. I also found a lot of the characters to be super unlikable, and I tend to like unlikable characters, but these are characters that are unlikable for like kind of no reason. Like they're just making decisions and doing things that are really dumb and don't make sense at all. It's like I can forgive kind of an unlikable character for doing things that like make sense, you know, even if it's only making sense in their head. In here, it's like, that doesn't make sense. And then you have characters just kind of flipping and doing 180s like 80% of the way through the book, and going from characters who are mostly useless to being like total badasses, but there's no progression in that. There's a lot of things that I feel about this, and I'm going to be doing a full spoiler-free review and a gripe about this book because I have a lot of issues with it. I'm really not sure if I'm going to continue. I don't think that I will, because I think there is so much potential for this series, but so many things were dropped, and I'm really bitter about the fact that I read over 500 pages of this and don't know anything still. Like, and not in a good way where you're like left waiting and you're like hungry for it. I'm just kind of like, why am I being left out of this narrative completely? Like, why? I don't understand. So I gave this book 2 out of 5 stars, and that 2 stars is basically for the world elements of gender and sexuality that I think were done really cool and unique, but ultimately I had a lot of problems with it. I'm leaning towards not continuing with the series unless I see a lot of reviews from people that I really trust that like love it and felt the same way that I did about book 1. So we'll see. If you've read this book and you've also read the second book and you have opinions, please post them down below, because I part of me wants to continue, but I'm really mad at it still because I just read it a few days ago and I'm mad. So that was the end of Topple for me. I finished the books on my TBR. I just planned on reading 2 books, and that was great, and I really enjoyed it, and it was a great time. So after that, I only had a little bit of time left in the month, and I wanted to pick up a short book and read it in one sitting, which is what I did. So I read The Sin Eater's Daughter by Melinda Salisbury. This can honestly be boiled down into this being a fantasy shatter me, basically, with less flowery writing. Still writing that's pretty good, but it's not like the flowery writing of Tadamafi. So this is about a girl whose touch is leaving lethal. She is the executioner for the royal family. She's not a part of the royal family, but she has been kind of taken under their wing because she is a daughter of a goddess embodied, so she can take in poison and then kind of poison people through her touch. So this is her story. She kind of navigates this court and discovers like what it is to be somebody who is like the goddess embodied and to also not be able to be touched and all that kind of stuff. I've had this book, I think, since it came out. I think this was a pre-order for me. It came out, I think, in 2014, and I got it basically because it was like a fantasy shatter me. Like, that's basically why I got it. But then I didn't read it for a long time because I heard a lot of reviews about being kind of bad, and I wasn't sure how I was going to feel about it, so I didn't end up picking this one up, but I actually liked it. It was a fast read, and it was kind of predictable. Like, there were things that I kind of knew were coming, and there's tropes that are in here that I tend to kind of like, so it wasn't a big deal, but that are like typical. There wasn't really any like new spins on it, which all sound like bad things, but I went into this with like really low expectations and I ended up just enjoying it. It was just a quick read, really, really easy to read, and I didn't hate any of the characters. I didn't necessarily love any of them either. I didn't think that anything was like super poorly done. There is an element in here that can feel kind of like a love triangle to some people, but I only consider things love triangles when both of the other counterparts have like equal chance, and that's not true in here. So there isn't really this like waffling. There is like one that is obviously like the winner of this whole thing. You know what I mean. I don't mean it like that, but like who is the one that you know the girl's gonna go for. So there is like a sort of element. So if you don't like any of that, then you probably are not going to enjoy this, but I don't really care when it's those kind of like love triangles because they're not really love triangles. So there's that element. But I ultimately had like fun with this book. It did a lot of things I thought I was going to do. It had some elements that were a little different, but ultimately I had fun with this book. So I gave this one 3 out of 5 stars. This is the first book in a series, and I'm not sure if I'm going to continue on with this series. I think the next book is kind of like a companion-y sort of story, so I may continue with the series and I may not. This one is perfectly fine, I think, as a standalone. So I might just leave it as a standalone because I enjoyed this one, but I'm not sure if I would continue enjoying the series as it goes on. So that is it for the books that I read in November. Comment down below, let me know if you have read any of these books and what you thought of them. So thank you all for watching, and I'll see all of you guys soon. Bye!